Welcome to Smacky's Garage. Today we're going to be replacing and installing a set of new hood pins on the 1969 Mustang. We're going to take and we're going to correct some issues that are with these ones, and we're going to put a brand new set on. So let's talk a little bit about what hood pins are used for. Race cars back in the day, you had a lot of lightweight components. When you're going at about 100 plus miles per hour down the road, or down a track, because no one raced on the road back then, there's only, if these hood pins weren't on in the car, there'd only be a single point of contact holding the hood down from flying up. So imagine you're going about 140, 150 miles per hour down the road or down track. You hit a small bump and then your hood ends up delatching because you only have one latch. And when it pops up, it's gonna slam right into the windshield and the top of the roof of the car, which is not ideal. So one of the solutions to stop that from happening was hood pins. You see a lot of hood pins being used in race cars, especially ones that have fiberglass hoods, a lot of lighter components. Sometimes you see them pinned at the front and the rear, sometimes it's just at the front. You see these also in a lot of 1960s and early 1970s muscle cars. For example, the 1969 Mustang Mach 1 had them. A lot of the Ford high-performance cars had them, and today we're going to look at reinstalling these correctly. So this car here doesn't have an original hood, it doesn't have an original frame support or radiator support in the front, so it was all replaced, so these had to be re-drilled. I ended up re-drilling them when I was building the car, and I did it before I did the primer on the vehicle. So when we look at this, you can see some of the primer that's on it. You can see these aren't tight. It's missing a screw. This isn't perfectly centered, but we're going to fix some of these things today. So we're going to end up replacing these. We're going to make these screws fit right. If we need to drill it, we're going to drill it. And we're going to add the lanyards to the correct location. So when I looked at a bunch of different vehicles online, the lanyards aren't supposed to be mounted here. I've seen some vehicles that have them mounted down here. I've seen some vehicles that have them tied up to here, but where they're really supposed to be mounted is off of this on the top of the radiator support. So they're supposed to be 1 3/8 out, so we're gonna have to drill some holes there and on this side as well. So those are both gonna get drilled. You can see I have them completely in the wrong location, so I have one down there and then I have one down there, probably because I didn't have the right bolt in place or at the time. So when I look at it, and you're looking at it from the front, it looks right because they're coming up from the right locations, but when you look under the hood, not in the right place. So we're going to fix that. We're also going to replace both of these. So these are covered in paint, you can see. You'll probably clean them up, but I'm just going to end up replacing them. So the kit that I bought was from Ford Racing. I bought it online at National Parts Depot. It's something that I've heard is very close to the original, so that was the goal for this. It comes with all the parts that you see here. You can see the lanyards aren't straight, so I'm currently tying them down and letting them straighten out. But what I noticed is, this is the same kit that's on the car now. What I noticed is it still doesn't come with the screws that hold the lanyards in place, so I ended up going to the hardware store to buy some. So let's go ahead and get started and pull the original ones off the vehicle. So one of the things I want to note is when we're looking at the car, so original hoods, that hole there that is oval was actually circular, and it was one of the easy ways to locate the hood pin hole. Since this is an original, it doesn't look like it's the greatest reproduction hood, I ended up working off of this here, so you can see that these aren't perfectly centered where they need to be. So that one is there. This one is centered. We're going to be replacing the pins, but we're not going to be centering that too. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start removing this pin and I'm going to replace it with a new one. So my goal is to have it be the same height. So for this, I'm going to go, you need to put the nut on first. I'm going to set the nut to the same height as this one. But I'm also going to put a washer on. This one didn't have a washer on it, and it probably should have. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to screw this down so that we're approximately at the same height. So you can see now we're about at the same height on these two. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this one out and I'm going to replace it. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here, same process. Screw this down, get it about where I want it to be, and then I'm going to take this out and replace it. Now before I go ahead and replace this and put it back in this correct spot, I want to put the screw hole here for the lanyard. To do that, it needs to be 1 3/8 out. So we go 1.375. So we're at 1.375. I'm going to do 1.375 from the center. I'm going to mark about where it needs to be. So you can see this mark is now 1 3/8 out from the center. So that's where I'm going to end up putting that hole. Now with both of these done and cleaned up, I'm going to start by putting the lanyard in, and then we'll do this one next. So for the lanyard, since it didn't come with any hardware, I'm going to have to use a number 7 tap screw and a large washer to hold it in place. Now moving on to the top, I'm going to take these out. Now with these come the backing plate. Now these we're going to end up replacing. You can see they have a protective covering on it so you don't scratch up the side that's exposed. But one of the things I noticed is these are really rough on this edge, so I'm going to end up having to file these down just so that they don't dig into the paint. I plan on painting the hood flat black at some point, but until I do that, I just want to make sure I don't damage these. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a file and I'm going to file around the edges of these. So this is definitely a stamped part, so when they are doing the stamping process and they push it, it's leaving burrs on the edges. You don't want those digging into your paint, so you need to make sure you clean them up and clean them off well. Since this is the side that's not visible, I'm okay just rough filing around the edges. Now what I should notice is on the clean side, there isn't going to be any rough edge because that's the way the stamp comes down and pushes through. It looks so much nicer than the ones that we took off. The other ones were covered in paint. These are nice and clean. And when I first did this, I remember the self-tapping screws didn't go through here easily and cause some issues. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually put the screws in here before I put it into the hood, just to get everything threaded the way I want it, so it's easier to pull together in the car. All right, so I'm going to take a quick measurement of these holes to see where we're at. So these are 1/8. The screws that we're using is 159, so they're pretty big screws. Their smallest diameter, they're 119, so these are going to really bite in. I'm actually going to try to open up these holes a tiny bit to make it easier to get these screws in. I'm going to go ahead and take my 9/64 bit and try to open them up slightly. Even running the 9/64 bit through them, they're still very tight. Still took a lot of work to get it through, but I was able to tap it using the screw that's provided. So I'm going to take some of the old screws and I'm actually going to use these to go through each one and to build the threads before I use the new screws, just so that I don't strip them. So I've ended up using a 9/64 bit to drill each one of these out, and it's made a big difference and they're much easier to get in. I'm not worried about them falling out because still they're not easy to get in, but even so, you're going to have this plate on the top of the hood, you're going to have the hood, you're going to have this on the bottom. Even if this were to fall completely out, you'd still have this in the hood in between you and the pin would be holding it in place. So there's no chance of it coming out. So I'm going to go ahead and try to drop all these in at once to see what happens. Now for the second one, same thing. Gonna drop this on. Cool, okay. So they're all on. Go ahead and I'm gonna tighten them all down now. Now they're all on. Do yourself a huge favor and make sure when you put these on, you thread them before you put them on the hood, or else you're gonna have a nightmare and they'll probably end up stripping, or you're gonna end up rounding out the Phillips head on the screw itself. Okay, now with those in place, we can go ahead and we can get the lanyards and everything on. Now to get the lanyards on, you're gonna need to actually pull them apart and separate it so that this piece is now free. And with this piece free, you can slip and slide this end down and in. Cool. So now that's in. We have this together. And we can screw this on. We're going to mount it right here. So a lot of the ones that I saw online, when we look at kind of where it's coming in, it's actually coming in from the top area of the grill up here and on to the screw. I think one of the things that you'll note when you do this is you're going to have one that's, you really should leave these out overnight to kind of straighten out. So I'm just going to let them hang off the vehicle. But when you look at them, this one's the same one. It's straightened out over time. This one I'm going to just put a heavy weight on it. I'm going to let it hang off the front just so that it straightens out. But I got to take this one off too. Now for the second one, using number 7 self-tapping screw, a washer, I'm just screwing it directly in. And this is going to come out the top hole and out front. Same deal here. Let this hang out. Now for these, it's going to be as simple as just screwing them in, getting them at the right height, and making sure everything fits. Now with all these out, I can set the right height on these. You can see this one is up a little high. Adjust it. This one's just about right. Everything came out great. The lanyards look good. They're in the right location now. The hood pins are nice and tight. They're clean, no primer on it. Same thing with the stainless pieces up top. So everything looks fantastic. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tune in next week for what's coming up on Smacky's Garage.